So we have 5 commercialized products in rare diseases. We have launched 3 products in the last 5 years and 2 in the last 2 years. And I'll speak to some of the lessons from our last 2 launches, one of each that I think, is germane to what we're looking to do with our potential gene therapy candidate in hemophilia A. 2 years ago, we launched Brineura, a enzyme replacement therapy for CLN2, a form of Batten's disease. It is a rare pediatric neurodegenerative disorder, in a very rare disorder. Brineura, the complexity of Brineura was the way it was delivered. It is delivered intraventricularly, and that's the FDA's jargon, not ours. But what that means is it's delivered directly to the brain via Maya reservoir. So for the first time ever, we're delivering enzyme directly to the brain. As we went to commercialize Brineura, we pretty quickly realized we needed to adopt a center of excellence model. This is, because it was the complexity of giving this, of setting up, placing a port, that initial delivery. We wanted to make sure that was in a finite group of hospitals, large children's hospitals, something we can control the safety and the, of the setting up and starting the therapy. So a model not unlike what Spark Therapeutics is endeavored with Luxturna. What we found was with these children's hospitals, once we got, neurosurgery, neurology, ped neurology, genetics, pharmacy to cooperate, once we got them working together, they were able to deliver this therapy safely and efficaciously, and it worked out very well for the patients. But what we were surprised by was frankly, their inability to navigate the insurance marketplace. In all of our other markets with the chronic disease space, and we have a hub, we have a specialty pharmacy network. The hub does benefits investigation. We kick the specialty pharmacy, the appropriate one. They adjudicate the claim. They get back to the patient. What is the copay? Do we need support? And at the end of the day, the patient hopefully gets, the insurance pays, the patient gets therapy. With Brineura, the hospitals are the ones that had to do that heavy lift. And we anticipated that Children's Hospital had the sophistication to do so, and they did not. So we found ourselves putting a lot of resources to help these hospitals with elements such as, an out-of-network. I think it's the out-of-network reimbursement. We spend a lot of time, even if they got a denial, some of the denials which are very standard for a new therapy, working their way through it, the prior authorization process. So a lot of effort went into that, a lot of learnings for us. And as we look at in the future, knowing that there will be, with a gene therapy, that the hospitals will end up buying this product many times, and they will be the ones navigating the insurance landscape, that we're going to have to put some infrastructure in to help them with that. Another piece is, and these are large hospitals, is that sometimes our conversation with Brineura, and Brineura is an enzyme replacement therapy. It is an expensive drug, not to the level we expect of gene therapy, but still a very expensive drug. Our conversations, the hospital went to finance, many times the CFO. And they actually had concerns around things like their cash flow concerns. So, prior to the launch, we set up a very limited specialty pharmacy distribution just in case there'd be need to white bag it into an institution. And we found that actually got used quite a bit. A fair amount of the hospitals say, okay, we don't want the cash outlay on this one, and they actually opted for the white bag option. Now, I don't know how white bag works for a gene therapy. You have to figure that one out with the roll the Brinks truck up with the negative 80 degrees, but something we're certainly working on. But just some of the lessons we learned, at least from the institutional side, some of the surprises we got. 10 months ago, we launched a product, an enzyme substitution for phenylketonuria, adults with phenylketonuria, PKU. PKU is a disease where the patient's the enzyme, they can't convert protein. Basically, they build up of phenylalanine, is built up, and it can be neurotoxic. The base, that foundational therapy for PKU is a very highly protein-restricted diet. And it is a brutal diet and very difficult for all patients, particularly once you get adolescent and adulthood, to really to stick to. 10 months ago, we introduced an enzyme substitution, Palynziq, to the marketplace. Palynziq, there's a lot of excitement around Palynziq because it's the first therapy that really actually allowed for, the majority of the patients that took it to normalize their diets while maintaining their Phe levels, within therapeutic range. So there's a lot of excitement in the community around Palynziq, but it had some complexity of its own. Palynziq is a non-humanized enzyme. It's a bacterial-derived enzyme. So the first time you're delivering a bacterial-derived enzyme on a chronic basis to patients. As you can imagine, there are some immunogenicity issues. First and foremost, is a side effect profile. With Palynziq, there are injection site reactions, many of which can be impressive. There's arthralgia. There's a risk of anaphylaxis, and we have a REMS program. All manageable, and we're able to manage, but still something we really need to educate on. The other part of Palynziq is that the titration schedule, your time to reach a point where you're actually seeing, the results of the drug is highly variable. Patients can respond within 8 weeks or that response may take over a year to get to. So we found that, that patient education was a real key piece as we brought Palynziq to the marketplace. Now, upon launch and going forward, we did a great job with patient education, working with the community, the clinics, the patient advocacy. We've really had a good experience with a safe and efficacious use of the drug. But where I think we fell short was prior to launch. And I think when we arrived, the patient community, although there was excitement, they didn't really have a grasp of what was hitting the marketplace. And there's a lot of misinformation obviously on the internet, and we had to deal with that upon launch. And kind of a lesson learned for us was, you can't start soon enough on patient education in some of these complex therapies. And as you look to, and I think as you look to gene therapies, it's even more important to do that. So as I, kind of look to, what are we seeing, unique challenges that we've identified to go forward, one of which really does lie with that patient education. A piece that, even though I think the nuts and bolts that we know how to do, it's going to be different bringing a gene therapy product to fruition, and also one in a space like hemophilia. I'll walk us through some of the distribution options that we've struggled with. You've heard the limited distribution model, the COE model from Luxturna. I'll give you at least a look at what we're looking at with hemophilia. And finally, kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the room. It's working with payers in this fragmented U.S. marketplace. A marketplace is built for chronic therapy. And how do we bring a gene therapy and make this thing work so there's patient access? So as we go into the hemophilia community, and this goes back to starting the clinical trials, one thing that we've learned was, and it's obvious like someone like Mark, but us an organization who's new to it has to learn, is it is a community that there's two dynamics there. One is, it is a satisfied community. They have a lot of good options. So it's not an unsatisfied, you're not walking into a place where there's an absolute unmet need. And it's also a community that has some trepidation, maybe some almost distrust of industry. And you think back to the tainted blood debacle of the 80s and 90s, that's completely understandable. So as we walk into, thinking, how do we, bring a gene therapy in the community, both from initiating clinical trials in that process as well as commercialization, we really need to engage the community, we felt, and provide education. And as we engage the community, some of the stuff that we've heard is there's a lot going on in hemophilia. I mean, Hemlibra is launching. Companies are being bought. There's multiple gene therapy trials. There's actually some confusion. The patients are almost overwhelmed with what's happening in their community. A lot of change. A lot of it good. I mean, it's exciting, but still a lot of change. In particular for the clinical trials, one thing we've learned is not every hematologist has the same knowledge of gene therapy. If a patient goes to their hematology treatment center, they may or may not get the same level of explanation from a different HCP. That's understandable. There's 140 hemophilia treatment centers across the country. Also a place where, from us and other companies are doing education, medical science liaisons. As you get to commercialization, I think the education of HCPs is a pretty easy lift, but something we do recognize, at least early on. And finally, this is a community, and they'll tell us they don't know the future. They don't know what they're going to be in 20 years, and they don't want to be part of a mistake. They're looking at, and there is a lot of excitement for gene therapy in this community. It's a potential cure, but there is also some trepidation. And so as we look at this, okay, how do we, as we go through, running through a phase 3 clinical trial and maybe potentially bringing a product to market, we see that as a challenge and really a patient education challenge. So we've embarked on is a very comprehensive, with our, both of our clinical team as well as commercial, trying to do very generic education on what is gene therapy and give a fair balanced view of it. This isn't product specific, this isn't disease specific, but what is gene transfer, and try to give a fair balanced view so that if a patient is considering a clinical trial, maybe they can make a more informed decision. And if a commercialized products, when they arrive, and hopefully they will, they can make an educated decision. This slide is one I lifted in my marketing department, so don't pay attention to content methods, but rather look at channels. And what I want to call out here is patient advocacy. In all these, communities, there's, they're all different. But with the hemophilia community, the patient advocacy, it is key. The patient advocacy organizations, they are, if you will, kind of the credible source of information to that community. And they're highly sophisticated. So what we have done is we have partnered with advocacy both in the development of the materials and the delivery of these materials. And I think for us as an organization, that's an important step. We have to realize that, we are an unknown still to the hemophilia community. And so, and the credibility lies with the advocacy. And to be honest with you, they're the best ones to deliver this information. We're kind of, if you will, almost a junior partner in this, in this endeavor. But I do believe it's important to, to get out ahead of this and to try to provide the community as much education as possible so that as they're looking at clinical trials, maybe a commercialized therapy, they can make an informed decision. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and this also helps clear some of that up. But a big lift and one that we look forward to, potential gene therapy, one we believe is very important. Distribution. When we looked at distribution initially, I was completely, I was drawn like many of us to kind of a very limited center of excellence model. And that's from a, the cold chain logistics standpoint, just makes it a lot easier. If you think about consistency of delivery of these therapies, you have a lot more insurance consistency, and that's important. And the payers like it. One thing the payers like about these limited models is they only have to contract with a finite number of hospitals. Hence, they have a lot more certainty on what they're going to pay for these drugs. They're not going to get surprised by a 5x charge or percent upcharge. And we've heard that actually from, the payers commenting on the Luxturna model. They really appreciate that because they have certainty in what their payment's going to be. The issue we have, though, is, the hemophilia community. It's great that model is best for BioMarin, but is it best for the community? And, I think the conclusion we're coming to is it's not. And, with the community, if you look, there's broad and open channels for all of the products get distributed there, including Hemlibra. There's a lot of home self-infusion. There are specialty pharmacies involved that you've heard of, like a Caremark, a Credo, Diplomat, ones you've never heard of that are mom and pop shops in the space. And there's 140 hemophilia treatment centers, and those are the medical home for those patients. So as we look at distribution, one thing we do not want to do is, force our model on it and then have that serve as an impediment for maybe patients accessing therapy. So we're probably going to opt for a wider distribution model. We haven't settled on one yet, but that's a direction I think we're going to have to go. Now, every community is going to be different. If I were to bring a drug out in the metabolic genetics world, and there are a couple in the place, potential for PKU in the future, we know that world well. We would run a much tighter distribution model in that world because we could. I don't think we can in hemophilia. So the final topic is kind of the 800-pound gorilla. This is our ideal world. In BioMarin, we call this our kumbaya slide. So in an ideal world, funding would justify the healthcare investment. It would enable broad patient access to treatment. It would address concerns about clinical uncertainty. It would fit within the budget and finance needs of the payer. That's a big lift. And finally, support the appropriate return on investment for the innovator. So this is, if you will, this is the aspirational state. But as you bring potential one-time curative therapies to market in a world that's designed for chronic therapy, we are not there yet. But we're working towards it. And we're working towards it in a multitude of ways. This is a busy slide. I'm going to stick to the right. One thing this is necessary is a partnership between payers and manufacturers. And in this case, the partnership really focuses on two areas. One is the unknown durability of effect, and the second is that disconnect of a one-time upfront payment with the potential durability over many years in a world that's built for chronic therapies. And the solutions that we need to address, the solutions that come forward have to address those two needs. Whether it's outcome-based agreements, is financing options, those are what we have to explore. I will agree that in today's world it's a little more difficult, but it's possible. And hopefully tomorrow's world there will be Medicaid best price waivers. There will be dispensation with some of the anti-kickback statutes. But still, we have to work for today's world, and we think there's some possibilities at least to make headway there with some outcomes-based solutions. And there's been a lot of ideas floated, a ton of press releases out there. you look at the four rows across, that's kind of how we bucket these solutions. Access rebates are how things happen today. That is how, payers and manufacturers and contractors are entered, how agreements are made. We had a payer advisory board several weeks ago in Chicago. We had 10 payers, and we walked through testing our ideas on finance ideas. We had one we were looking at a warranty idea, some multi-year agreements. And at the end of it, we put some of the ideas that, that really boiled the top they had interest in, but we included the access rebate. And we asked them what they would choose. 8 of the 10 payers said access rebate. The 2 that didn't, one worked for an integrated delivery network, and the other was retired. The good news was, though, is of those 8 patients that, yes, we're doing access rebates, they were all excited to work with us towards a world where we could actually have an outcome-based agreement that made sense for these one-time therapies. So there is a partnership we're working forward. There is hope. The outcomes-based agreement, I'll spend some time. I'll get another slide on that. That's really where we're living right now. Cost predictability is interesting, and it's interesting because there's actually a Medicaid solution. Louisiana Medicaid has put a Netflix model out there for the Hep C drugs. Now, if you look closely at it, it looks more like a cap than it does a volume distribution agreement, but still it has, it has some of those aspects. So as for us in industry to see Medicaid going beyond a supplemental rebate and maybe hope of working collaboratively and with some solutions maybe out of the box, that's hopeful. So we're certainly going to, as we engage the Medicaid community, we'll look across all the board of different solutions. That may be one of them. Population risk pool, that's the panacea. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have a national model? There is an interesting endeavor in Western Massachusetts, MIT Newdigs partnering with Harvard Pilgrim on on what hopefully a risk pool of different payers in Western Mass. That one is a heavy lift. I've spoken to a lot of the folks involved. It's going to be difficult to get it off the ground, but hopefully they do, because if they do, there'll be a lot of learnings. It's a worthwhile project to lean into, but not an easy one to come to fruition. So this is a solution kind of where we're looking. And I took this slide from MIT Newdigs mainly because I think it is representative of a lot of the solutions that we're kind of exploring across the industry, and certainly us. And call it the performance-based annuity, call it an outcome-based agreement. And what you need, though, is something with some simplicity. It's, if you're going to actually execute and operationalize it. And I think there's a simplicity to this agreement. You have a performance contract. You have an initial upfront payment tied to your treatment, and then over the course of, and for most payers they want 3 years, but 3 to 5 years, an annual payment that is tied to a predetermined clinical outcome. So if you can do this, now right now we're kind of held at 23.1%, so we don't ding our Medicaid best price. But even that gives you a little bit of wiggle room, but hopefully over time we'll have more, because you will be able to smooth some of the payment, address that disconnect between the high upfront cost of the therapy and the potential durability over years. It is an agreement that has that element of risk sharing, the manufacturer stepping up and saying, hey, we're going to get behind our product, we will share risk. The payers appreciate that. That is a key portion of these contracts. There's also an element of actuarial uncertainty this might smooth a bit, especially for smaller regional plans. These are genetic-based disorders, many of them. They may get a bolus of these patients. Anything that could smooth that effect helps them out. And so this is, kind of directionally where we're, at least where we're working in a lot of different areas. There's also finance models we're working on. A lot of work being done. And I also would say that, within the, industry, this is an area, and I don't think it tickles antitrust, but we actually cooperate and talk quite a bit because we're all trying to solve for the same thing. We're all trying to solve for the patient access, because at the end of the day, if we are able to bring these potentially transformative, therapies to market, wouldn't it be a shame if we couldn't get broad patient access for those therapies? So with that, I'll leave you with the idea that as we sit here, we truly are hiking on the road that we're building. One thing that really struck me visiting the ASGCT this year was the size. I mean, the growth here has been amazing, and I think that speaks to the fact there really is a critical mass behind these gene and cell therapies, and it's an exciting time to be here. So thank you for your time.